don't know what it means, while some just know the dictionary definition, meaning as a practice of educating students in a way that accommodates their individual differences, disability, and special need. But today we have a guest who that is his field, area of specialty when it comes to special education, and he will be telling us what special education is, maybe different from what some of us know, and will also help to answer some questions related to special education. And today in the studio we have a guest and
an inclusive education advisor.
Okay, inclusive education advisor.
Yes.
So what does that mean?
Okay, inclusive education is a broad term that also includes special education.
Wow.
But I'm going to start by telling you what special education is. Okay, so special education is the additional support that children with disability receive in school. We do that by either in the classroom or something called a resource room, where you pull them out of the class and give them a specialized education because of their needs and their strengths. But inclusive education has to do with all round, has to do with the teachers, the administrative staff, even the architecture of the school, has to do with putting side by side not just children with special needs, but every other learner with diverse strengths and weaknesses in the same class, learning all together. So basically, special education has to do with just special educators working with the children with disabilities. However, inclusive education has to do with the teachers and everyone, all the stakeholders working together, making sure every learner, irrespective of their physical needs, their learning needs, working together side by side.
Okay, and you may mention children with special needs. Special need. Yes. So what are those? Can you please explain those special needs?
Okay, we have various special needs categories. Okay. We have children with learning disability. We have children with physical disabilities. We have children with intellectual disabilities. And examples of learning disabilities are children with dyslexia. That's the inability to read.
Okay.
And we have children with dysgraphia.
Okay, inability. Their only problem is they don't know how to read.
Yes, reading.
But any other part of the body is okay.
It's okay, yes.
Okay.
And then children with dysgraphia, that has to do with handwriting.
Okay.
Most children with dysgraphia have difficulty constructing the letters like we typical individuals can do.
Okay.
Yes, and also we have the children with physical disabilities. We have children with spinal bifida, children that are mobile, not immobile, that are on wheelchair.
Okay.
And then we have children with autism as well. And then we have children with Down syndrome. So the categories of children with special needs or disabilities are broad, but it depends on whether they are physical disability or learning disability or intellectual disability.
So all this you mentioned, are they under types of are they under different types of special education?
No.
Or talking specifically about the children now?
Yes, about the children. Special education is the education that these children receive. Now, what I've just mentioned, children with autism, learning disabilities are all categories of special needs or categories of disabilities.
Okay.
However, the special education itself, it's the education that these children with disabilities or these children with special needs receive.
Okay.
Yes.
So you've given us a definition of what special education is. Can you please give us, are there other scholars that define it differently from what you just defined?
Well, defining special education is not a one-way thing. You don't have a specific definition of it. However, the most accommodating definition is additional support that children with disabilities receive.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right. Farouk, what are the different types of special education?
Okay, different types of special educations where we have the pull-out. Pull-out is where you provide a child with disability in the general education is being pulled out of his or her class and taken to a resource room. That's a pull-out. Then we have the inclusive classroom.
Excuse me, why did you pull the child out?
Okay, the reason why we pull conduct the pull-out is because when a child with disability is in his or her class, the general education teacher is there, every other children, they are there. By the time a special educator is in the classroom with them, we try to avoid distractions. So you pull out the child, especially when the child is not offering that particular subject, or the child has a limited attention span. So let's say for example the class is for 5 minutes, and the child's attention span is 20 minutes. You can allow the child stay in the classroom for 15 minutes or 18 minutes, but not more than 20 minutes, because when the child is there for more than 20 minutes, he or she will cause distractions there.
Okay.
And he or she might not even pay attention anymore.
So how do you get to know that this is the number of meaning to the child?
We do assessments,
okay,
and observations.
Okay.
So in the first instance, when you meet this child, you might have maybe from the history, you discussing with the parents, the teachers, they'll tell you that the child cannot sit for so long. But the job of a special educator at that moment is to carry out the assessment. And then when you do the assessment, you just engage the child, try to engage the child, especially with academic tasks.
Okay.
Because anything apart from that, the child will show interest. Yeah. But if it comes to academics, there's always a problem. So you engage the child with academic tasks and use a timer. Set the timer and see how long the child will sit with you and involve his or herself in the academic task.
Wow.
So by the time you know the time the child can stay, you can now, maybe in the subsequent assessments, you can now see if you can extend that time. You might start off with 5 minutes.
Okay. The
next time you say to the child 6 minutes. The next child 7 minutes. So that's how you keep going until the child is able to sit for as long as 20, 30 or even an hour.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So you mentioned the pull-out type of...
Yes, the pull-out. And then we have the resource room.
Okay,
the resource room is, we also call it learning room, but the resource room basically has to do with allowing the child stay in his or her class, but the child comes into the resource room where he comes to meet the special educator. The resource room has everything a child with disability will need that is not found in the typical classroom.
Oh.
Yes. And then after the resource room, like I said, we have the inclusive classroom. The inclusive classroom is when the special educator and the teacher, the typical teacher, general education teacher, is in the same classroom. So everything is provided in that classroom. The child might be seated close to the teacher. That way he or she will not cause distractions to every other children. But the special educator and the general education class teacher are working together in the inclusive classroom. Yes.
Okay. So the pull-out and the
pull-out, the resource room, and the inclusive classroom.
Well, that's great. So now, Farouk, your own area of specialty.
Yes.
Which one is your own?
My own area of specialty is helping educators and teachers to design learning experiences for their children with disabilities.
Oh.
So I work directly with teachers. I've also been a special educator working with the children. But I also noticed that it's not just by working with the children. You also need to work with the teachers themselves.
Okay.
Most teachers don't have the experience of working with a child with disability. So my own area of specialty is working with the teachers and schools to train their teachers in how to work with children with disabilities.
Okay, so for how long have you been in that field?
That will be 8 years.
Oh, 8 years. That's a very long time.
8.
So why did you choose that field?
Okay. In honesty, I didn't actually choose special education.
Okay.
Initially in school, I applied for biochemistry.
Oh.
I loved the essence of genetics and trying to modify genetics and all. But I didn't get the cutoff, and I was given special education and rehabilitation science. That's University of Jos.
That's really Jos.
Initially I didn't actually enjoy the course, because if you're not aware of what special education is, there's always a stigma attached to special education.
Yeah.
There's always a stigma attached.
I think we're coming to that. Just.
Okay. So in the first year I had my doubts, but in the second year, after studying and speaking with some of my lecturers and the professors there, I got interested in special education, and I built my passion from there. And ever since then, I've not looked back.
Wow. So that means you've once been a teacher, you've taught special students.
Yes.
So what was the experience? And did you really like it at first when you started it? How was it like, the experience?
Well, working with children with disabilities or children with special needs is, it takes a lot of your time.
Wow.
It takes commitment. And sometimes there's the sense of demotivation, you get burnt out, because sometimes it's not as easy as working with a typical child. You can work with a child with disability, except for a child with learning disability now. You can stay for as long as 6 months just teaching that child how to recognize letters A to E. Just 5 letters.
Okay.
6 months. And I mean, all the other children are moving away from that. They're going into the other letters, but you're still stuck there. Sometimes that can be demotivating. But with persistency and commitment, it's always.
So during those period of times you were teaching, so which student were you?
Okay, I've worked with children with learning disability, children with autism. I've worked with children with Down syndrome. I've worked with basically some other children with disabilities, but the ones I know that I've had most contact with, the children with autism, children with learning disability, and children with Down syndrome.
Okay. So what are those teaching style you use on these children?
We have something called mostly the one-on-one teaching style.
Okay, one-on-one.
One-on-one teaching style. You have to sit with that child, teaching that child one-on-one. Sometimes you can do the group discussions, but the group discussions has to do with when you're teaching the child social skills.
Okay. How
to communicate, how to start up conversations, how to respond to conversations. That's where you can mostly do the group discussions. But the most effective way of teaching a child with disability or special needs is one-on-one teaching styles. And when you're teaching that child, you need to break the concept down into bits. You don't just dish out the instruction at large like that. You break it down in bits, and until the child has mastered the first bit of what you're teaching before you go to the next one.
Okay.
Because if you start off with a particular skill and then you jump to the other without the child understanding that first one, the child can confuse it.
So you keep doing it repeatedly
until that child masters it.
Oh, okay.
You keep teaching it repeatedly. So for example, now I'm teaching the child how to recognize letter A. I need to make the child understand letter A, how to recognize letter A, and also how to call out that letter before you go to letter B. Okay. Because we start off by teaching letter A and you go to letter B, letter C. Before you know it, the child might see letter C and call it letter A.
Oh.
Because you're teaching all of those letters at the same time. So you need to ensure that the child masters the first letter before you go to the next one.
Yeah. Oh, that's very interesting. So, did you encounter, I mean, you must have encountered challenges.
Yes, quite a lot.
So how did you overcome those challenges?
Well, like I said, the first thing as a special educator is commitment.
Okay.
When you start working with a child with disability, you get challenges and barriers from the child first, how the child understands what you're teaching. That's the first challenge. You need to find a way around it.
So I need a lot of patience.
You actually do.
Wow.
So when you encounter first the child needs to understand what you're teaching them, and then that's the first challenge. Now the second challenge also comes from the school management team, in the sense that they are in a hurry to move that child to the next class. Wow. So you need to ensure that they're always on your neck, putting pressure on you to ensure that that child gets what you're teaching them. And again, the learning pattern of each child with disability is different. You can't say because I've used this teaching style example, with this child, that same teaching style will work for this child. You need to keep testing, trial and testing it to make sure that what you've used for this child, you might use it for this child but might not work. So you need to collaborate with your colleagues and see what.
But I asked you, you told me basically the teaching style you have is, I think it's
one-on-one. Yes, one-on-one. Yes. Now, the reason why I said it's not the same kind of way is that sometimes a child with disability might learn faster than the next child with the same kind of disability. A child with learning disability now, maybe both of them came into your own center or to the school at the same time.
Yeah.
You assess them at the same time.
Okay.
However, the way they will learn will be different. So you might want to start up both of them at letters A or recognizing the letters, but one person will learn faster than the other.
100%.
So you might feel, okay, I'm still doing the same thing, but why is this person learning faster?
And the other one.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes the way the child even dresses now can also hinder the way the child is learning. Now let me give you an example.
Right.
The child might wear a t-shirt that has the letters on it, letters of the alphabet on it. However, when the child stands in front of a mirror, it's not going to look the same.
Yes.
It's going to be the other way.
Yeah.
So that again has changed what that child is learning. So sometimes when you're even trying to print out a t-shirt for a child, we always want to ensure that what is on that t-shirt should be inverted. Not all the time, but it should be inverted so that when they stand in front of the mirror, they're seeing the correct thing. You might be standing in front of the mirror wearing letter B. Now the B is written like this. However, when you're standing there, it's inverted. It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
So if you're teaching the child this is letter B, and then the child is standing in front of a mirror and it's not seeing letter B, it's confusing. That's another challenge entirely. So that's just the learning pattern of each child with the same kind of disability is different. So they learn at different pace.
At different pace. Okay,
yes.
Well, so when you're dealing with these children, they tend to misbehave in the class. Yes. So how do you maintain discipline in your class?
Before we start up the academic journey,
okay,
the first thing you need to tackle, especially if it's there, is the behavior. You need to tackle the behavior. Now we get to ask the parents, what kind of inappropriate or negative behavior does this child exhibit?
Okay.
Now you need to first tackle this inappropriate behavior before you start up with academic task. Because by the time you start up academic task before tackling the behavior, that behavior will show up itself and distract you from learning. So you need to tackle that behavior. Maybe the child does not like taking turns. Typical children, when it's time to maybe play with a particular toy, by the time while they're growing, you always teach them to take turns. This child is playing with this toy, I allow the child to play with that toy. When the child is done playing with it, you can now play with the toy. However, it's difficult for children with disabilities, not all anyway, difficult for them to understand taking turns. So you need to teach that, because if you don't teach that, it might disrupt you. You're working with a child and the child sees another child playing with his or her favorite toy. The child will not want to pay attention to your task anymore, the academic task you're teaching. The child will want to play with that toy. So you need to tackle behaviors first, and then before you jump into academics. So that's how we work. You need to tackle behavior before academics. Yes.
Wow. Does that really answer the question? I mean, okay.
Because basically, if in order to tackle behavior,
what I'm going to say is,
yes.
Back then, okay, when we were in school, then
yes.
when you misbehave, the child will come up, you now call you out, and maybe give you a punishment.
Okay, I understand.
Make
now.
you come back to other.
Now, tackling the behavior.
Yeah.
Tackling the behavior is not the same with tackling the behavior of a typical child. In order to tackle the behavior, we do something. There's something called ABC of behavior. The antecedent, which is the A, the behavior itself, and then the consequence. Okay. The antecedent is you knowing what triggered the behavior. The behavior is the inappropriate action that the child is exhibiting.
Yes.
Then the consequence is you dealing with that child, not dealing with the child, but dealing with the action. Now, if the child now exhibits that behavior, you might do a timeout. A timeout is when you tell the child to sit in a particular place and give the child a specific time to sit there. Well, the time most students don't like that. Especially when they're just sitting in this particular spot and every other children they are busy having fun and all of that. It gets to them. So that's one way you can tackle that behavior. Another way is take out the child's gadget.
Okay.
They love playing with their gadgets. They love playing with their favorite toys. That's another consequence for behavior. So when the child now exhibits a behavior, especially when you've told the child severally why it is wrong to exhibit that behavior, you now tell the child, before actually going into the consequence phase, you now tell the child that if you do this one more time, this is the consequence. I will take out your gadget, or you're going to have a timeout, or you're going to stay with me for the rest of the day. They don't want that.
Most children don't like that.
They don't want that. So and even the idea of going through a consequence will stop them most times. Will stop them from actually doing that behavior. That's if the child understands why he or she should not conduct or should not exhibit that behavior.
So is that discipline applicable to all kind of children with special needs?
That's why I say it's not a one size fits all.
Okay.
You might use a particular consequence for a certain child, but if you use it for another child, that is just a walk in the park. The child doesn't even care about that.
Wow.
So it's a waste of time.
It's a waste of time.
For example, you might say a child that is used to staying or playing alone, and then you now tell the child to sit with me for the rest of the day. The child is used to just sitting alone. So telling the child to sit with me for the rest of the day, it's just a very enjoyable thing for them. So it's not going to work. So you need to understand what that child likes and try to use that to their own consequence.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Farouk.